The Dallas Stars surprised a lot of people by letting go head coach Peter DeBoer. Joey Erickson of Locked On Stars is here to talk about why that happened and what's next in Dallas, coming up next on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Stars, Joey Erickson. And Joey, a little surprise after the season. Your team goes to the conference final 3 years in a row, and yet Peter DeBoer out as head coach. Were you surprised when this news broke?
I was a little bit, but as we got farther and farther away from Game 5 against Edmonton, which of course was the eventual elimination game from the Stars, I got a little less surprised, and I pretty much landed on the fact that I think it was the right decision by general manager Jim Nil. And it was really, really interesting to hear all the conversations and rumors, rumblings that were coming out of the Stars dressing room, supposedly after that Game 5 elimination game. And of course, how DeBoer handled pulling Jake Oettinger in that game, which I defended. And even Jim Nil mentioned in his press conference, he had no issue with the pull. But some of the comments, I think, after the game in his post-game presser, I think really did him in. And I don't think it was solely made because of the comments on Oettinger, but it certainly did not help. And Jim Nil mentioned that he thought it was the right decision for the Stars and the organization. And if there was any sort of issues trust-wise or relationship-wise with your franchise goaltender and Jake Oettinger and your number one goalie for the next 6 to 8 years, it was probably the right decision to cut ties with him and move on. But obviously the Stars had a ton of success with him at the helm, and that's not going to be easy to replace. During his 3 seasons in Dallas, he had picked up and accumulated the most points out of any other team in the NHL, but they don't have nothing to show for it, as we all know.
Do you think he lost the locker room at some point?
I wouldn't say that. Nil did speak on that a bit too, and he doesn't believe they lost the locker room. I wouldn't go that far to say he lost the locker room, but I think there was some changes within maybe some relationships there. How could you not? Because he also, during his exit interview a couple of days later, he still had not talked to Jake Oettinger. And I thought that was a massive, massive mistake. And Nil mentioned that may be a bit unfair just because they're processing the loss and everything. But I just feel like as a head coach, you need to go and clarify why you made the decision with your young goaltender, just to let him know where you're coming from. And it wasn't all on Jake Oettinger, as he said, but it kind of was the way he put it. So it was really, really fascinating to see it all break down. And as I said, it just felt like the further removed from the series we got, it didn't really feel like it was turning in his favor. And it's really, really shocking because Jim Nil also never fires coaches, especially under contract. It's the first time he's ever done that, and DeBoer still had a year left on his deal. So the Stars are going to have a rambunctious offseason once again here.
So what was, I mean, if it wasn't necessarily the Oettinger pulling in the last game, what were some of the other factors that led Nil to make this decision?
I would say it's probably a culmination of the 3 Western Conference final exits. Look at just this season. They got outscored 13-5 at 5-on-5. You're not going to be anybody doing that, let alone the Edmonton Oilers with 2 of the best players on the planet. And for a coach that thrives on offense, right, that's what he's kind of known for. That's his I guess his shtick, right? That's his mantra. Like, he can score, or he can get the offense to figure it out. Well, the last 3 Western Conference Finals, they haven't figured it out. The power play a season ago in the first edition of this Edmonton Oilers versus Stars matchup. 0 for 14 on the power play. Not going to beat any team in a 7-game series, going 0 for 14 on the power play. And then it was just a really quiet offense again against Vegas a few years ago, right? I think that also played a pretty massive role. I've also said, I think right after Game 5, right after the loss, he had the job still. It was a post-game presser that I think kind of put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. But if you're Jim Nil, you also have to factor in, well, he's done this in a few other places before. He's been very successful. And if you're Nil, you've won back-to-back general managers of the year. You feel like you've put together a damn good roster and you haven't even really sniffed a Stanley Cup. I think he probably believes they should at least have been to a cup. And time again, DeBoer wasn't able to get that done. And I think we can all agree Stars have a pretty dang good roster. It's not perfect. Look at the right side of the defense this season, but that's still a pretty good roster. And he just hasn't got over that hump of the Western Conference Final for whatever reason. I think those were factors that played a role along with the Jake Ottinger comments.
What was so terrible about that post-series presser?
I just felt like it was piling on your goaltender in a lot of ways. And I know he said, I don't blame it all on Jake, but then he went into, well, it's a big sample size. He's lost 6 out of the last 8 games, whatever it was, against Edmonton. And it just felt like you're piling on a goaltender that just gave up 2 goals on 2 shots. And let's be frank about this. Corey Perry was wide open in front of the net by himself. And then the Stars had a bad change and gave a breakaway to Matthias Janmark. Yeah, you would like every goaltender, you would like him to get a piece of those or make a stop. But for a goaltender that you should be praising for what he did to get you to that point, and he just outdueled the best goaltender in the world over the past few years in Connor Hellebuck just a few weeks ago. And that's not to say Jake Ottinger was totally outplayed by Stuart Skinner. I'm not here defending that Jake's the best goaltender in the world, but he did a lot to get you to that point. And this isn't also a Jake Ottinger that's fighting for a number 1 job next year. This isn't a Jake Ottinger that's, hasn't got paid yet or looking to leave or something, right? He's in trade talk. He's going to be around for 8 years. So maybe you just don't want to deal with some of those tensions. That's why I thought it was pretty bad. Also, it's because this is probably more important, actually, before any of the other points are made, but he's loved in that building. He's loved within the dressing room and that building. So he's a fan favorite. And maybe don't go after the fan favorite or the I guess the office favorite, so to speak.
What will the Stars look for in a replacement? And have there been any candidates out there that have been rumored to be favorites at this point?
Well, I think you have to toss the name Neil Graham out there for favorites, and Jim Nil had a lot to say about him. He had high praise for Neil Graham during the press conference the other day. He, of course, is the AHL coach of the Texas Stars, just a few hours south of Dallas here, and he's also in a Western Conference final as we're speaking. And he mentioned he's won a lot, and he's developed a lot of players. That's hard to do at that level. 5 winning seasons in Texas, and he's also dealt with the likes of Maverick Bourque, Thomas Harley, Jake Ottinger, some others, so there could be some continuity there. I think another name that maybe has to be thrown out there is like a Jay Woodcroft, right, who was the previous coach before Knobloch in Edmonton. And yeah, you have your host of, recycle coaches, so to speak, that we all talk about at this time. But, I think Jim Nil, he mentioned a lot. He's open. He's open-minded. He's not necessarily looking for a veteran, not less necessarily looking for somebody that's too young also, because at the end of the day, this team is ready to win now, and you have to find a good mix. And he also wanted to be cautious about not taking a step back, because you can make one little change, one bad move, and you take massive steps back. Well, look at what happened in Vancouver this last season. It was a massive step back, and if Dallas isn't careful, they can end up that same boat really, really quickly, and they have a lot more changes they have to do. But I think Neil Graham's probably up there as a top guy. We'll probably find more out after their season's officially done down in the Calder Cup playoffs, but I would throw him up there in the list.
Is there a timetable? Do they want someone in place before the draft, for example?
Yeah, that's a good conversation. I would think so. Of course, they're going to take their time and do their due diligence. I imagine that Nil has already had a top list of candidates, and they did this not too long ago. The Stars are no stranger to making a lot of coaches moves. Before DeBoer, they gone through 4 or 5 guys, I feel like, the last 10 years, probably even more than that. So they're not necessarily strangers to this. But yeah, I would think they would want to get somebody in that they can voice maybe some opinions on, even some free agents. They got a lot of free agents they have to try to re-sign or let walk, so to speak. So I would think, yeah, they would try to get somebody in there, get a philosophy going on, and see what they like about some of the players they do have, or looking out at some others they can bring in.
All right, Joey, it's going to be an exciting off season. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
We're on YouTube, of course, and wherever you get your podcast at Locked On Stars. My personal account, Joey the Jet 19 on X, but follow us on Locked On Stars as well on X. And yeah, we'll be covering the DeBoer saga and all the coaching search saga the rest of the way, since the Stars are the only team without one right now.
All right, thanks so much, Joey. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. I still love eating out, but not at the expense of my financial well-being. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you could use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year.